Alright, so this is our chapter 2 review, and I broke it down into sections sort of based on the order that we went learning the different forms of line. So the first one we of course learned was mx plus b form or slope-intercept form, right? So number one, we're writing an equation. Make sure and read the directions on these. In slope-intercept form of a line through the given slope and the given y-intercept. So here all we're doing is substituting in the m and the b into our equation. So the answer to number one is just going to be y equals negative 5x minus 7 because it is a negative 7. So that's our solution to number one. Very simple, just making sure we understand where the slope and the y-intercept go in that form. Now number two, we're writing an equation, again in slope-intercept form of the line. So in order to write the equation, first of all, we do need to know the y-intercept, and we can see here that the y-intercept is the point 0 and 1. And we can also use rise over run to find our slope, right? So rise over run, I'm just going to go from this point to that point. You could have done the other two, it really doesn't matter. I did go up 3, and then I went right 2. And again, we know slope is the rise over the run, and both of them are positive, so it would be a positive 3 over 2. And then honestly, once you have those two answers, it's just like the last question, you're just substituting those values into your form. So the answer to number 2 is y equals 3/2 x plus 1. And that's the solution to number 2. Number 3 is number 1 backwards. They give you the equation in slope-intercept form, and they just want to make sure that you can identify the slope and the y-intercept. So the slope we know is going to be the coefficient of x. So in this problem, the slope would be negative 8. And the y-intercept is going to be the point 0, and then our b value, which happens to be 6 in this problem. So again, nothing to work out there. It's just making sure you're able to identify what the slope and y-intercept are based on the equation. And then finally, for the slope and y-intercept, number 4, I do ask you to graph it in slope-intercept form. So we always want to do our y-intercept first, right? We're always going to do 0 and then whatever the number is that we're adding or subtracting. Of course, in this case, we're subtracting 1, so it's going to be 0 and negative 1, which means my first point is right here on the y-axis, 0 and negative 1. Now, there's not a number in front of x in this particular equation like written, but we know there's understood to be a 1 here. And if it helps, write it as a fraction. So 1 over 1 is the same thing, which just means that my rise is 1 and my run is also 1, kind of like that one that we had on the zombie activity. So from my y-intercept, so from the negative 1 down here, I'm going to go up 1 and right 1, which is going to put me right here. And that is the equation of my line. Maybe I can get my line tool to be cooperative. Yeah, that's not so bad. So those first 4 focus on slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form. All right, then we got into point-slope form. Remember point-slope form? That's the really long-looking one. As a matter of fact, I'll write it right here. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we did graph a couple of times on this, and we talked about it. But remember, this is usually the one where we worked it out. So number 5. Now again, make sure and read the directions. It says write an equation in point-slope form that goes through the point and the given slope. So my point I know is my x1 and my y1, and of course the slope is negative 8. So here you're just going to do kind of like what we did back up on number 1, where you're just going to take the values and you're going to plug them into the equation. So y minus, so since it's minus and negative 6, it's really y plus 6. My slope is negative 8. And the the x value is 4, so x minus 4. Do not work this one out. They specifically said leave it in point-slope form, so you're finished with that equation, and that is the solution to number 5. Number 6 is the one where we are going to have to work it out. So I want you to, again, read the directions. This is very important. We're going to write the answer in slope-intercept form, and it goes through 2 points. Well, here's the problem. I can't just plug the numbers in, right? I have to work this one out. So this is the one where we have to, again, work it out. The first thing you have to do is find the slope. So just as a reminder what the slope formula is, we use that several times. So I'm going to do that first. Excuse me. So like this would be x1, y1, x2, and y2. So that's going to be my first step, is I'm going to find the slope. So that's going to be 1 minus 4 over negative 3 minus 2, the change in x over the change in y. I do get negative 3 over negative 5, which is a positive 3 over 5. So that's my slope. Now, in order to get it to slope-intercept form, again, remember, slope-intercept form, that's the first 4 questions we just talked about, that's this form. Well, we can't just plug our numbers directly into that because I don't know the y-intercept. So I have to use point-slope form to help me get there. So using point-slope form, just like we did on the previous question, I'm going to use my x1 and y1, which in this case happens to be 2 and 4. So y minus 4 equals, I now know the slope is 3/5, and then x minus 2 for the x1. So I just used point slope form, I plug that in, and now I'm going to work it out. I do have to use the distributive property here. So I'm going to get y minus 4 equals 3/5 x. That's going to be minus 6 over 5. Remember, when you're multiplying fractions, that's the same thing as saying 3/5 times 2 over 1. You multiply the numerators and the denominators separately. All right, and then finally, in order for it to be in slope-intercept form, I do have to move that 4 over. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Again, I'm actually, like, this is negative 6 over 5 plus 4, which is the same thing as negative 6 over 5 plus 20 over 5, right? 20 over 5 and 4 is the same thing. So that's going to give me, not negative, but positive 14 over 5. So to make it look nice, I get y equals 3/5 x plus 14 over 5. So that is the solution to number 6. So that is the long one, where we're using the slope formula and point slope form so that we can write in our equation in slope-intercept form. It's number 6. Number 4, we're asked to graph in point slope form. Again, we did this on the zombie activity. I think there were 3 or 4 of them on there. So just as a reminder of how to do that, remember that because of the way the formula is, again, going back up here, we know that there are negatives built into the equation, right? So since there are negatives built into the equation, I have to be careful when I take out that 3 and the 4. When I take out the 3, that's actually going to be a positive 3. And when I take out the 4, it's going to be a negative 4 because of how the formula and, of course, negatives work. So that's going to be my first point that I graph, the point 3 and negative 4. I do not have my glasses on, so I hope this is in the right spot. Here we go, 3 and negative 4. I can see that my slope is negative 1/5. Now remember, we talked about that negative can either go on the top or the bottom. Now on this problem, because of how my graph is obviously given to me, I'm going to not, so I'm showing you what I'm not going to do, okay? I'm not going to put it on the top. If I did negative 1 over 5, that means I would have to go down 1 and right 5 from this point right here. I can't go right 5. Now, I'll run off the graph. I only have 4. So I'm going to choose to instead go 1 over negative 5. Remember, we had a whole conversation more than one time that whenever your fraction is negative, it doesn't matter where you put the negative, numerator or denominator. So in this case, I'm going to personally choose, because what I'm going to do is that'll make me go up 1, but left 5, right? Rise over run. 5 is negative, so I'm going to go to the left. So from my point, I'm going to go up 1, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's going to land me right there. Right, so that obviously fits on my graph. That's a whole lot nicer. I don't have to worry about it running out of space. So that is the answer to that one. Number 7. Number 8, we're asked to find the x and y intercept of the line intergraph. Again, we practiced this. This is standard form. So now we did point slope form. Now we're on number 8, and we're going to talk about standard form. Standard form, of course, is ax plus by equals c. I did ask specifically for you to find the x and y intercept and to graph, so I'm going to be looking for both both answers to the question. So for the x-intercept, I know that that's always going to be the point, some number, and 0, right? Because on our x-axis right here, every point on that line is some number and 0, which means that my y value is going to go away, right? If I let y equal 0, then that means this term right here is going to go away. 2 times 0 is 0. It's not there anymore, so I'm just left with 6x equals 12. Well, that's really easy to solve. I can solve 6x equals 12. It's just 12 divided by 6, right? So we know our x value is 2, or my x-intercept is 2 and 0. So the same thing, but for the y-intercept. So for the y-intercept, again, I know every single point on this y-axis is going to be 0 and then some number for the y. That's our y-intercept. So this time, I'm going to let my x equal 0, again, because 0 is where my x-coordinate's at. And the same thing happens. If I let this be 0, 6 times 0 is just 0, and that term is just going to go away. And then I'm just left with 2y equals 12. And same thing, super easy to solve, one-step equation, y is just going to equal 6. So 0 and 6 is my y-intercept. So I found the x and y-intercepts. Again, I'm asked for that specifically, so I'm going to look for that specifically. And I'm going to expect to see that. And you have to graph it. So the graphing part's easy once you have those 2 points, honestly. So the x-intercept is 2. The y-intercept is 6. So that means my line is right there. Super easy to graph once you have those points. Ooh, my line's a little wonky, but you see where it's supposed to go. All right, number 9. 9 and 10, sorry they're a little fuzzy, but your paper is at least a little clear. These are our horizontal and vertical lines. This is where you remember. So see how it says the y is 2. Well, the y is here and 2 is here, right? As a matter of fact, any point that happens to be on this horizontal line at 2, the y value is going to be 2. So if you have an equation that has only a y, not an x and a y, as we talked about, we know it's going to be a horizontal line at that number. Using the same idea for number 10, but this time it's an x, right? So if it's x equals -1, here's my x-axis right here. -1 is right here. I know it's going to be a vertical line through -1 because every point on that line is going to be -1 and something. So it is a vertical line through the value, in this case, x equals -1. All right, and then the rest of it, 11 through 15, we talked about parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, so for this one, again, make sure and read the directions. I need my answer to be in slope-intercept form, and it has to be parallel. Okay, so slope-intercept form, one more time, just like at the beginning of the test, is mx plus b form, but I am going to have to work this one out. Excuse me. Parallel. We know that parallel lines have the same slope. So if I'm looking at this one right here, I know that 2 happens to be the slope of this line because it's in slope-intercept form. So I know that's the slope that I want to use. Here's my x1 and my y1. So just like the previous problem of the page, I know that I'm going to use point slope form to help me out a little bit. All right, I told you guys when we went over it, point slope form is the most useful. Might be the yuckiest, but it's definitely the most useful. So y minus y1 is 8. The slope we know is 2, and x value is also 2. So I put it in point slope form, but again, they want me to write the answer in slope intercept form. I do have to work this one out. This one's not as bad as the last one, actually, because this one doesn't have any fractions. How much you guys love fractions. So y minus 8 equals 2x minus 4. And I do have to move that 8 value over, so I would be adding 8 to both sides. So my solution to this one is going to be y equals 2x, and then -4 plus 8, of course, is positive 4. So that is the equation of the line that is parallel to the given line and goes through the given point. Number 12, same thing, but different, right? Again, make sure and read the directions. They, again, want our answer in slope-intercept form. This time, however, we're going to be doing a perpendicular slope. So let's look at the slope they give us. They give us the slope of a -2/5. That's the slope that they give us. Well, the slope that I need to use is its opposite reciprocal. We talked about it in class, we wrote notes, we practiced it. Opposite reciprocals. So the slope that I need needs to be a positive 5/2. The opposite sign would be a positive, and reciprocal just means I turn it upside down. The numerator and denominator trade places. Now my x1 and y1 are the points given. All right, so -1 and 0. And just like the last problem, I'm going to put that in point slope form. So y minus 0, that's kind of nice, equals 5/2. And then x minus -1 is really x plus 1. I do have to use the distributive property. Certainly nothing new at this point. Y minus 0, well, that's just a y. Anytime you subtract by 0, that's just y, so I don't need to do anything there. 5/2 times x is 5/2 x, and 5/2 times 1 is 5/2. So that's it. That's the solution to number 12. Writing the equation perpendicular to the given one. And then the last three, I give you 3 sets of lines, and you have to tell me whether they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So let's look at, the easy ones, like the ones that are in slope-intercept form. Like, we know the answer to the slope to this first one is a -7/4. The slope to this one is a -2. The slope to this one is a -7/6. So those are super easy ones to find because the slope is right there. It's slope-intercept form. Now, if you remember, we did talk about how in standard form, the shortcut to get that slope is to do a negative a/b. Otherwise, we have to change the whole thing into slope-intercept form, or we could just use that shortcut. It's pretty nice because that's always going to give me my slope. So on number 13, since this is the a and this is the b, I know my slope is going to be a -16/-28. I do have to reduce that. Negative divided by negative is a positive, and I can reduce both of those by a factor of 4, or divide them both by 4, and you get a positive 4/7. So if I'm comparing those two slopes, this one and this one, they're obviously opposite signs, and they're reciprocals. So these two lines happen to be perpendicular. Okay, so the same thing for number 14 and 15. So for number 14, again, I can see here that my a is -6, and my b is 3. So the slope is going to be a -6, right? The negative already in the formula. A also happens to be a negative, and of course 3. So at 2 negatives, a negative is a positive, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So let's look at those two slopes. -2 and +2. Well, they're the same number, but they're opposite signs. So that doesn't count as them being the same, and they're not reciprocals. The reciprocal of 2 is a half, so they're not opposite reciprocals, and they're not the same. These two are neither parallel nor perpendicular. They intersect somewhere, but not in a special way. And then finally, number 15. So number 15, just like the other two, I can see that a is -21, b is -18. So to find that slope, it would be a negative, again, because it's built into the shortcut, -21 over -18. So be careful, all those negatives turn out to be a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive, divided by a negative is indeed a negative number. I can divide all of these by a factor of 3. 21 divided by 3, 18 divided by 3, and let's look at those two slopes. The slope is a -7/6. The slope is a -7/6. They're exactly the same number, exactly the same sign. They are the same. So that means that these two lines are parallel to each other. And that, guys, is your Chapter 2 test. Make sure and practice these. Go back and look over them and be ready for your test tomorrow.